Welcome to the CareerJitsu podcast, where we connect the art of Jiu-Jitsu with your career. Our mission is to empower and inspire you with engaging conversations and valuable insights from people just like you who benefit from the shared relationship between your workplace and the art of Jiu-Jitsu, leading you to a more fulfilling and successful life. Your hosts, Jason Patterson and Frank D'Amelio, and we are joined today by two extraordinary police officers, Dave and Matt. They are going to talk about their career as a law enforcement officer and its connection to Jiu-Jitsu. I want to say first that without question, one of the most important duties that I can think of as a society is to make sure that those that are looking out for our public safety are treated in a way that also prioritizes their safety and wellness. Frank, we are excited about this one, aren't we?
We've been looking forward to this for a long time. And Jason, we've talked about how many similarities law enforcement and jiu-jitsu has, the overlap in not only strategy, technique, philosophy. So we are going to gain a lot of golden nuggets of wisdom from these two gentlemen. Matt and Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I've owned a school, Frank, for like 20 years now, and I would like 15 out of the first 20 years of training and training others in jiu-jitsu. I would say we've only had maybe 3 officers total that have trained in the first 15 years. And in the last 5 years, we have had dozens of police officers that have signed up as members. So there's been a big movement the last like 5 years getting law enforcement trained in jiu-jitsu. And it's part of that is attributed to law enforcement officers willing to share what they are learning on the mats with others. Dave and Matt, I'm very thankful for. They run law enforcement courses for us. And we have had 50 plus law enforcement officers come through our doors and do the law enforcement courses with Dave and Matt over the past few years. And without that, I don't know. I think that is a great opportunity for our school, but also a great opportunity for law enforcement all over our state and even nationwide to really spread how important jiu-jitsu is for law enforcement.
Yeah, that's a great observation, Jason. I mean, jiu-jitsu is really flourishing in the world of law enforcement and security for a good reason. But let's ask our guests. Let's start with you, Dave. What got you originally interested in the art of jiu-jitsu?
So it took me a long time. I started jiu-jitsu when I was right before I turned 34 years old. So I was 33 when I stepped into the doors of Team Link here. And I'd already been a police officer I've been a police officer for almost 16 years now. And it took me until about 4.5 years ago to start. And what started was I was a defensive tactics instructor for probably about 13 of those 16 years. And I was always under the impression that hey, if you go to the ground, you did something wrong. And that was ignorant until I went to a jiu-jitsu based law enforcement class out of state. And that kind of opened my eyes to maybe some of the stuff is applicable. And I really didn't do much with that until a couple years later. One of my friends and one of my academy classmates was a member here at the school. And I moved into town and he says, "You going to come to jiu-jitsu?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "Well, I'm driving by your house right now. I'm picking you up and bringing you to jiu-jitsu." And that was in March of 2021, and the rest is history. So that's what got me in. That was T.
Oh, Tiago.
Yeah.
Yes. We got to bring him back.
We got to bring him back.
Absolutely.
Got to make jiu-jitsu great again.
And you have no regrets
No regrets.
from that day on.
No regrets. My only regret is I started earlier, and I wish I'd had the time to train more.
Right. Don't we all?
Yes.
And Matt, what about you? What got you into jiu-jitsu?
I started looking at jiu-jitsu about a year or two into my policing career, and it kind of pushed me over into, wanting to learn grappling skills is just going hands-on a couple times in the earlier parts of my career and just not being comfortable, not knowing what to do. And, just multiple officers trying to take down, a single suspect or, whatever it may be, and just having no knowledge or idea of any type of body mechanics and just struggling to kind of perform simple takedowns. And I just didn't like being so uncomfortable. And that's kind of what I said, screw it, walk through the door, and, it's helped me through every aspect of my life from there.
And you haven't looked back.
Nope, not once.
I think it's really interesting, Jason. I was just talking to somebody else we're gonna have on the show at some point, Mike Nichols. And when you look at security, law enforcement, you look at people who are usually in good shape, right? Physically strong and athletic. But a lot of times that's just not enough. I remember Mike telling me about they had to restrain somebody at his hospital, and big giant guy, he had a hard time restraining another big giant guy. And then Nichols came in and he used his techniques that we learned to gently handle somebody, and he was able to put that person down. And I think that's something that a lot of people in the law enforcement sometimes might not realize, that it's not just the muscle, it's the technique.
Yeah, I mean the mechanics of the body. I think law enforcement officers having a chance, getting trained more in jiu-jitsu definitely helps understand the mechanics of the body. And I think that there are Dave. Can you tell us a little bit about like how much professional development in terms of defensive tactics? How much professional development do police officers actually get?
Not enough, not nearly enough. So at my agency, it's we get an 8-hour training day for defensive tactics in service per year, and 8 hours is the day. That counts your commute, that counts break time, getting set up in the classroom, getting set up in the gym, going to lunch. So at the end of the day, after going over some case law and policy and things like that, the actual mat time, so to speak, practical application of defensive tactics is maybe 2 hours or so per year. And that's for releasing liability from the department saying, hey, we trained you, but that's not nearly enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, what in your opinion, Dave, what is the reason for law enforcement training in jiu-jitsu? Like, why is jiu-jitsu, there's many martial arts that law enforcement can learn. Why jiu-jitsu?
Jiu-jitsu is all about control, and that's just simply Dave's opinion. And having been here for several years, learning the art of jiu-jitsu, it's all about control. And one of the biggest parts of control is this art, this sport of jiu-jitsu, the application of it. It doesn't require it's camera friendly, so to speak. You can control somebody without hurting them, and you can get them under control without hurting them. And optically, it looks a whole lot better than some of the videos that are out on the internet right now of police officers that have zero training, and they resort to their instinctual reactions of throwing strikes, throwing kicks, and it just looks bad. And that's where if you train jujitsu and you face that adversity and training on the mats, you learn how to control yourself, and you can learn how to control another human being without injuring that person.
Yeah, control is a big part of it. Controlling yourself and being able to control a subject without hurting them. So Matt, can you help us out a little bit with talking a little bit about maybe some for our listeners to have an example that maybe you have been in where you've been able to utilize the techniques in jiu-jitsu to make sure that yourself and the subject is safe?
Sure. I mean, there's a bunch of like minor, small stuff we use on a daily basis. Just even for example, like, an escort position, holding the arm up tight, the elbow close to your sternum, have your hand down close, their hand down close to your hip line, just as a secure position when you're transporting them. Back in the days, people would just hold their arm and walk back, and they'd spin on you. Next, you're in a scrap. So, I mean, nowadays, more and more police officers are using even just minor techniques that is preventing, an escalation of force. But even, I can remember, like a car extraction, for example, we're taught, like a collar tie to control the head so they can't turn, to the passenger side of the vehicle to obtain a weapon or something like that. Then you can have additional officers help with the extraction. I remember that. That's what we did, and then we were able to get him to the ground, and which I then did for us a knee on belly for the jiu-jitsu listeners, and essentially just kind of tire him out from there. Let him exhaust his energy, and then from there it's quite simple. Roll him over and handcuff him. So that's just one example of many, but
So I think it's really interesting. Sometimes we joke about it, but it is true that jujitsu is the gentle art. Have you guys seen, after taking jujitsu, has your philosophy on handling people become more gentle and kind because of that philosophy?
absolutely, yeah.
100%.
I think it's kind of a dual effect of I've been taught, an array of techniques and skills now that allow me to be confident now. So it's confidence and actual being able to back that up with confidence with skill allows me to kind of evaluate situations in a much more calm manner, I think, rather than, as you know, Dave was getting to, instantly escalating to strikes, because it's more or less a natural instinct. You don't know
Right.
anything else. You just start striking if that's the only thing you know.
And that's one of those things. You can be gentle, but having a little experience here um, in training is you can be gentle, but you know there's another level to your ability where you can throttle your intensity up to whatever you're facing, right? You can try to be gentle, and that person is forcefully resisting you. You might have to ramp it up a little bit, but you can still control that person gently, so to speak. Like Matt and I were doing a roll today, and the takedowns that we had were gentle, right? They were effective. They were gentle. Nobody gets smashed. Nobody got hurt.
Yeah, so from the physical point of control, you have to be, as a police officer, you have to be a controlled fighter, you have to be a psychologist, you have to be a therapist. Like there's so many different roles that you have to play as a police officer. So now what in terms of emotional control or the mental benefits, or you have to be you're a lot of times in high pressure situations where you have to be able to stay calm and be able to know what you need to do in that moment. Can you elaborate a little bit on how jujitsu can help a lot of police officers like yourself in situations where they're in a high pressure circumstance?
Yeah. So everybody in this room was a white belt at some point, trial class guy, and you come in and a smaller training partner is wiping the mats with you. And your natural human instinct is to freak out. That's where that term spazzy white belt comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to learn it. It takes a long time. It took me probably over a year to become comfortable being uncomfortable. Because if you're uncomfortable in a controlled environment like jujitsu, how is that going to translate to being a police officer in a high pressure situation? So now, if I'm in a bad position, I'm relaxed. I'm waiting for an opening. I'm waiting for somebody to move so I can make my move. And I'm not panicking. And that's really brought my emotional control. It's gotten a lot better. And that's super helpful for law enforcement. So if you've never been put in an uncomfortable physical altercation and you flip out, you're going to run out of gas real fast. And you might lose that fight.
Or you're going to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
Big mistakes.
And as a police officer, we don't have the option to lose. We have to win. We have to make it home to our families. And we have to make sure that whatever we're dealing with, the situation ends safely for everybody.
Right. Absolutely. So I have a question for you. You both went through rigorous training for your jobs, physical and mental training. How did that help you in jiu-jitsu? All the things you learned in the police, how did those things help you on the mats?
So I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing. When you constantly put yourself in uncomfortable positions, you're testing the bounds of what your perceived limits. You know what I mean? Uh, Very few people that don't train are aware of the just pure exhaustion that comes with a fight, and they're just like physically, emotionally, mentally putting yourself in those positions, getting essentially comfortable with being uncomfortable. You start to learn your limitations. You start to learn when something's actually a limiting factor, or it's just a mental block. And I think that directly trans over into like success in like a police academy or boot camp or wherever it may be, because like this is probably just a mental block and not actually a physical limitation or anything that you can push past it. And it's the same thing you experience here day-to-day training.
Right.
Yeah, so going through all of that training, Dave and Matt also, Frank, they did a law enforcement a big course through the Officer Survival Series. It's out of Manchester, Connecticut. Rob McGow, he's a great instructor. He runs a great program there, and both of them did this course, and it's LEO specific, law enforcement specific training, jujitsu training specifically that is designed to help law enforcement officers do their job better. And that is a great program that they went through, and so in saying that, it's really important, I think, for police officers to find jujitsu schools that are LEO friendly. They understand what police officers have to do and what they have to know, because I know Rob says this. In jujitsu, you can get into positions where you can be anywhere on the mat, But police officers have to get their subject into the same position every single time.
Right.
And that is not an easy task.
Hello, everybody. It's tap in time where we tap in to your thoughts. So today we'd like to reach out to any of our listeners who might be in law enforcement, but in any other industry or career where it's part of your job to de escalate high tension situations. To use your words first, obviously, and then maybe in some situations where you might need to physically manage an individual so that they're not a harm to themselves, a harm to you, and a harm to others in that situation. So if you have any stories to share or any experiences or even just thoughts, please drop a few comments and join our tap in session.
In the next question, I guess, and where I want to gear this towards is talking a little bit about obstacles for police officers. So, what types of obstacles do you see, Dave, in why it's hard to get police officers to train jujitsu? Like, what are the obstacles that we are faced with?
So there's a bunch. So cops are stubborn. So I've been doing this a long time. Cops are stubborn. They don't want to do the extra work, right? Oh, I'm not getting paid. I'm not going to go to that training. Or I have other things to do. I have a overtime shift. I have a detail to work. They want to be home with family. And that's one of the things that, in my opinion, detracts people from coming to learn a new sport and be vulnerable on the mats. One of the reasons where I didn't want to come to jujitsu until I was dragged here by my friend was they're going to find out I'm a cop. And if they don't like cops, they're going to beat the crap out of me. And that wasn't the case at all, obviously. I'm not about making new friends in my mid 30s, but I came to Team Lincoln, made family here, right? So that's one of those things. It's the vulnerability, being vulnerable, knowing you're not going to win for a long time, and just the time commitment it takes to become proficient in jujitsu. And I said my 4.5 years here, I'm still not proficient. I have so much to learn. And it's one of those life skills where you have to continue training and continue training. Once you think you know everything, you're done. Because nobody's ever going to know everything.
No, except Jason, of course.
Come on now. So, yeah, one of those moments, quiet moments. Matt, like I know you've talked about this before in the past, where as a police officer, you have to wear so many hats and you have to be trained in so many different things. So, do you think that that is an obstacle for officers, like time wise? Time is a really difficult thing.
I mean, absolutely. Like you said, we just have so many responsibilities now, and that people just expect so much out of us. They expect us to have, I hear, people saying, oh, they should have a bachelor's, a blue belt, they should be proficient in firearms, they should know how to talk to suicidal suspects, and it comes to essentially for police officers, they got to weigh their priorities. So, and where they think it's most needed, whether it's grabbing an education, training jujitsu, improving their firearms. I know a couple guys on our agency that they train firearms all the time, all the time. I barely train. He's going to be much better than me at firearms than I am at than I. That's something I need to improve on myself too. But like I said, it becomes an issue of time essentially because we're expected to know so much. And then on top of that, guys are working 4 and 2 rotations. They want to see their family, and then finance is an issue too. So it just becomes a balancing act of
Yeah.
like where they want to prioritize jujitsu in their list.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, jujitsu in terms of priorities, I mean, this could be just my opinion, but I think you guys might agree with this, having been doing jujitsu for as long as you have. Jujitsu should be at the top, somewhere near the top,
Yeah,
as a
so I
priority
agree because
for
it's
law enforcement officers.
multi-beneficial too. I know a ton of guys that are, fitness freaks, but they won't step foot in the gym, when they could just step foot in the gym and they'll still be in great shape. So I mean, I agree. I think that's one of the benefits of jiu-jitsu. It's multi-beneficial. And fortunately, we are seeing a change. More and more people are starting to recognize the benefits
Yeah,
of
yeah,
jiu-jitsu.
the physical, emotional, mental, social. There's so many different benefits for that police officer get from
I
jujitsu.
wonder if at some point it will become a required piece of the training for more than like whatever the 2 hours that they might do it. in the future. Do you see that happening or?
I unfortunately I don't see that happening for some time because again it's just a list of priorities where case law changes daily almost. We're looking at legal education we have to improve on, and then we're talking about how to deal with for example individuals on the spectrum like how to because that takes a whole different skill set.
Right.
And then you're talking about you need to teach new officers how to drive at higher speeds because we respond to cars, and we're talking then you got to teach grappling skills, firearms. It's a long list of things we need to
You
learn.
really
And
kind of
within
have to be a renaissance person.
correct, and within the finite time span we have in a training academy, it becomes very difficult to work that in, especially like I said, when things change and you got to reprioritize continuously. I think it's going to be difficult. I would like to see it happen. I just think it's going to be quite difficult.
What would you guys say to somebody in security or law enforcement right now who's considering jujitsu
Train
Yeah,
right now.
train.
right now?
Right now. Don't
Just-
wait.
Just go.
I regret waiting as
Yep.
long as I did. Go
I know
train.
I do. I'm not in law enforcement, but I regret waiting as long as
Yeah.
I did.
But here you are.
But here I am. And I'm
Here
so
you are.
glad I'm so glad that I do it.
So I'm going to circle back on what Matt was just talking about and the question you asked about, making jujitsu kind of like a mandatory thing. Is that I've been teaching defensive tactics a long time, and there has been a paradigm shift that I've noticed in the past 5 years of, as opposed to the old static techniques of hitting a bag with a baton or throwing punches at a punching bag with no resistance. In the past several years, there's been this paradigm shift of incorporating a lot more jiu-jitsu into police defensive tactics training. Obviously, we can't in Massachusetts, we can't choke anybody, so that takes away a lot of the things that in sport jiu-jitsu. But a lot of the things that we do now, a lot of agencies are starting to do now, is pressure testing. Right, versus just hitting a bag and yelling "get back," which doesn't work on a resistant subject. Where pressure testing is we present a problem, and what can you do to mitigate that problem? And all the techniques that we do, at least in the agency that I work for, is we go full pressure test. We show a skill, we rep it out, and then we say, okay, go 100%. And that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu because it's controlled, and if a technique is getting put on, you tap. If
Right.
it's not safe, you tap and you start over again. But the pressure testing is important because that builds confidence in the officers that are going through the training. Like, okay, I did all these techniques and skills. Let's put it to the test on a fully resistant subject, a training partner, maybe somebody much bigger than you. And you can see at the end of the day that these techniques work. And if something doesn't work under pressure testing, we reevaluate and maybe go to something new.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a great model that you basically took from jujitsu because that's what you do in jujitsu, right?
Yes.
You learn some techniques, then you resistance drill them, and then you roll and you try to in your roll you try to implement them. That's great.
That's very well said because I think that right there is the reason why jujitsu is so popular in law enforcement because you are able to pressure test and go 100% and not get hurt. There are other things that police officers can get trained in, where you need a lot of equipment to not get hurt, or even if you don't really need a lot of equipment, but you're learning something like some striking arts, people can get hurt. Jiu-jitsu is one of those arts where you can go 100% and really work on being in bad positions, getting out of bad positions, maybe, or even keeping good positions, and still make sure that you're safe and your training partners are safe. And that is awesome. I think that is the big reason. Am I right? Why jiu-jitsu has become a really popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things where, for the listeners, it's jiu-jitsu is a very safe art. I've never been, knock on wood here, I've never been injured to the point where I can't train, I can't work, I can't go about my life. And that's still doing 100% resistance here on the mats. Like, you need to check your ego at the door and know that, hey, you got to be humble when you go on the mats. Know you're going to get tapped out. You're not going to do well in some roles, but you just move on. If something isn't working, you tap, you reset, then you slap bump and go again. Like, don't worry about getting hurt. Check your ego at the door. Your training partners are here to take care of you.
And keeping your composure too. I mean, when you're going 100% and you're in a bad position, for example,
And you're tired,
you're being
right?
smothered, like
Frank smothered me today.
Yeah.
It was very nice.
It's love.
Yes,
With love.
with love.
Always.
And when you're in these bad positions, and you're being smothered, like you have to be able to keep that composure, be able to keep that mental composure, and just doing that training all the time. Now you're out on the job, and something happens, and you're in a bad circumstance, or you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable, or you're needing to get out of a situation that's high pressure, and you're able to still maintain that composure mentally because you're just so used to it. Yeah. So. Yeah,
It's
that'd
both
be
the physical, both the mental. You guys have given us a lot of insight into how jiu-jitsu has helped you. And I hope that you motivated some of our listeners who are thinking about trying it, whether they're in law enforcement, security, whether they're teachers, whatever. It's just such a good art to know that you can protect yourself, the people around you, and you can also control somebody and stop them from hurting somebody else and themselves.
And it's good for your mental health.
Mental health,
Mental health is
100.
huge. It's one of those things when I started training here is if you had a bad day at work, I don't feel like going to jujitsu. And my wife says to me, "Don't you have jujitsu tonight?" Fine, I'll go. And whatever BS happened during the day, the second you step on the mats and start training, you forget about everything.
It's gone.
It is huge for your mental health.
It really
Well,
it,
it's pretty hard to think about anything other than not getting subbed when you're in the middle of a roll. It's pretty tough. So
It-
that's a nice luxury about
Yeah,
it.
you don't think about how
You don't
your
have-
boss yelled at you today.
you know how the Buddhists always say you must be in the present moment. You must work to be in the find a leaf, stare at a leaf. The nice thing about jiu-jitsu is it gives it to
Yeah.
gives that to you
It
for
forces
free.
it upon you. And that's
You
one
are
of the
in
nice
that moment. That is so true.
It's not like golf or basketball where like there's time to think like about other stuff like jujitsu in the middle of a roll. You don't have the luxury.
No.
Like
You
Maverick and
don't.
Popkins said, if you think, you're dead.
Exactly.
That is so
And that's a nice hidden luxury of jujitsu.
the one word that I do think of is survive. That's the one. That's it. That's all I can think of when I walk.
Go train now.
So some final takeaways, Frank, for our listeners, in terms of what this
I mean,
episode. What
the thing that I really like to hear is we always try to talk about what jiu-jitsu can do for you in your career in an industry. And I think they said it very well that jiu-jitsu not only trains them to do their jobs better, but the paradigm, as Dave said, the model that you go in, you learn something, then you pressure test it, and then either it's successful, and if it's not, you tap, you rebite, you reset, and you go at it again at a different angle with a different perspective, and you fix what needs to be fixed. That not only applies to law enforcement, but any industry you're in. If you're an engineer, if you're an electrician, if you're a teacher, that model is universal.
And it gives you confidence.
And it gives you confidence and the ability to say, if I fail, I'm not a failure. I just learned. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. What about you, Jason?
I was looking at some quotes, for whatever reason, in terms of like law enforcement and what if there's some like really good quotes on law enforcement, and I came up with this one. Found this one. It's by President Calvin Coolidge. I don't know if you remember Calvin Coolidge. I don't know what year he was president, but this is supposedly what he said. No one is compelled to choose the profession of police officer, but having chosen it, everyone is obligated to perform its duties and live up to the highest standards of its requirements. It's really nice because it really like makes you understand how important it is for society in general to treat law enforcement officers with the respect that they deserve for what they give every day. If every law enforcement officer in this country could train in jiu-jitsu, everyone would be safer. And
100%.
not only that, but they would be able to take control of a situation more effectively. And most importantly, as a police officer, they would be able to develop a healthier and more fulfilling lifestyle.
Wow. Well said.
That was deep.
That was profound. That's what we get here on our channel. I would like to, first of all, say to both of you, thank you for your service, for keeping us safe. I mean, I could be a teacher because you guys are out there keeping the bad guys away. I raised my kids in a nice community where they feel safe. If it weren't for you, we would not have that. And so we appreciate you going out there and taking the risks for the average person to go out and do their own thing. So thank you both for that, sincerely. We appreciate you, we admire you, and respect you. And thanks for coming in on our show. We hope everybody enjoyed.
Absolutely. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having
having
us,
us.
guys.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Well, there you have it. As we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on the powerful connections we've explored between the art of jiu-jitsu and your career. In your workplace and in jiu-jitsu, you learn to adapt and navigate challenges. So remember that persistence and the courage to embrace the lessons that you learn are the keys to your growth both on the mat and in your career.